right? I'm in Georgia. Stasia's in Kiev, and you are in which part of the world, Stefan?
Yeah, the Netherlands, and I live right next to the coast too, so I'm always like blaming the UK for the bad weather.
Yeah, very fair point, I would say. Okay, I think we can start because I see more and more people joining. Uh, Once again, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And today we are talking about the elephant in every tech room right now, which is vibe coding. And some of you love it, some of you hate it, but either way, it's everywhere. It's in our inboxes, in our pitch decks, and it's definitely in your engineering team's Slacks. So we bought two people who are living inside this problem from two different sides. Stasia here is the head of business development and Ralabs. She sees what vibe-coded products look like when they arrive at a professional engineering team store. And Stephan Moerman is a CTO at Kommit AI. And basically, he's the person you call when the prototype needs to actually survive contact with the real users, because he has scaled an MVP to 150,000 users without a rewrite, cut deployment cycles from 3 days to under 30 minutes, and built full engineering teams in under 60 days across healthcare, fintech, and SaaS. Wow, Stefan, this is such a portfolio. I cannot even, I don't know. So between the two of them here, we've got the full picture. And once again, thank you everyone for joining. And before we dive right into the topic, I just wanted to say that for being online, you will be receiving an opportunity to secure a 20-minute consultation with Stefan. And for that, you will only need to send your project information to our email address, which is business@ralabs.org. I will obviously be writing that in the comments so everyone can write it down. And after receiving your project information, we will obviously qualify the projects and choose one lucky participant to secure that consultation with Stefan. All right, let's start. I believe everyone is already joined, and I want to start with a quick fun fact that vibe coding did not exist 18 months ago, and according to Collins Dictionary, it has become the word of the year for 2025. I believe this fact already talks about the speed that we are looking at right now. So, Stasia, I want to start the questions with you. Ralabs works with founders coming out of exactly the phase of what happens after the vibe coding ends, right? Because we're not here to talk about what vibe coding is. We are all very familiar with that. So I want to ask you, what's the most common thing you're seeing with the clients that Ralabs is working with right now?
Thank you, Kata. First of all, I'm happy that we are finally having this conversation live, and I wanted to encourage our audience to challenge whatever we are saying as much as possible, because we are about to uncover the truth. Probably we will open this Pandora box and won't be able to close it, but that's the goal of this conversation. So first of all, I wanted to warn everyone and ourselves not to treat it as a problem or as something that is bad happening. That's definitely an opportunity for non-technical founders to go through this 0 to 1 stage and to visualize and test on the market what they are about to put there. So what we see is that the amount of inquiries are coming and it's high and high every month. We see that the prototypes, the MVPs, are very different. We see that there is a certain distinction of the vibe-coded solutions that had or did not have the technical person at the very beginning, because the vibe coding differs depending on whether it's a engineer who is vibe coding and use it as a tool to just speed up his development, and a non-tech person, some business guy lady who had an idea and didn't know how to implement it. And it differs a lot. Like, I mean, we see that there is much more work and diving deeper when it comes to the non-technical founders to use the vibe coding. And it's a very different thing when an engineer uses it to speed up the development. So I think, Stephan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we will be targeting more the non-technical founders, right? Because the technical ones can help themselves and have to move forward with their solution. But we wanted to target more the non-tech people who already made some progress, already has something to work with, probably even tested the market, and see that their business value is there, that they can really fulfill the need, right? And we wanted to help such people. We wanted to make sure their product is ready, is growing, is super scalable, secure. But how to do this, we'll probably cover in the next, I don't know, half an hour or something.
Yeah, correct. And I wanted to mention that, we've been collecting some questions from our website users and from our clients. And Stephan, the next question is for you, because this usually happens with the AI trends, that you are very optimistic. You like, everyone's all around the trends, everyone's trying it, everyone's using it, and then poof, it drops. So before we get into how, let's first of all just tell us and confirm, is it actually possible to do this right?
Yeah. It's funny because when you were talking, Stasia, the first thing that came to mind to me is that the only thing that really changed is that the first draft became really cheap, right?
That is true.
But there is a very big difference between a well-working product that survives all the compliance checks, all the security pen testing, and an influx of users. So, I think a lot of people got to the point where they just got it working, right? It works. You can log in, but they haven't really tested it. And I think what I've seen happen quite a lot is that a careless MVP is now very easy to make, right? To get to the point where you can say it works, you can log in, here, get this URL, go. But the boring basics, maybe, the things that you skip over now that are very important, get skipped over. The clean data model, the module boundaries, the deployment processes, the logging and monitoring of the application, and a clean understanding of even what was temporary and what is foundational, right? And that last part matters quite a lot. So some parts of an MVP could be temporary. I think when people build new software, it's actually good to take in consideration what you will, what you're willing to drop or keep. But some decisions become super expensive later. And if you wait too long with bringing in the right expertise, there's the risk of all sorts of security nightmares, data breaches, and just an overall very bad user experience. When if you then bring in the right people, it's going to take months to get to a point where you're good enough again to recover. And I think the data model authentication, the permissioning, all the architecture stuff is the part that's still really hard to do right with just vibe coding. And
it's interesting you're saying this, like, about the authentication. I really hear around that authentication is simple. Like, what's complex about it, right? But then you start vibe code the authentication, and it's that simplified that you can really just skip it in a way. It does not cover the edge cases, some threats that may be posed to the application, and it's tricky. So the medal has two sides, right?
Yeah, I think I heard someone say something very fun like last week when he said like we didn't build a skyscraper on day one, but we did not build on wet cardboard boxes either, right? And it's
Okay.
about finding that middle ground. Like, you know, what I always tell myself and the people working directly with me is like, we can move fast, but let's make sure the future team doesn't hate us for the decisions we make today. Because what happens is when you're vibe coding, you naturally cut more corners without realizing what corners you're actually cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And down the
Mm-hmm.
line, when the right people do come in, they ask all the questions to which you likely won't have an answer, and the AI won't have the answer anymore either.
Okay. I will be playing on our customer side today. I will be asking, like, let's switch to the positive side. So what is the happy path that can be covered by the vibe coding? I mean, definitely it is an enabler, right, for the idea. How to either move it. Not sure. Maybe it will be covered by our framework later on. But like, can we touch this right now? Is there any happy path that can be covered by the vibe coding, and what should be the guardrails?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things it has enabled really well is to get the ideas out there much quicker. Whereas maybe 2 years ago, when vibe coding wasn't a thing, y- there was a lot of friction. You needed a developer, you needed to gather requirements, you needed to set up a backlog, a sprint, get a designer, get some budget, and build a team. And you wouldn't really have the option to just get your ideas out there, spend the weekend to prototype and get something that's clickable and essentially is a demo of what you're trying to build. Um, and I think the power is that now any founder can sit down with any AI coding tool and say like, hey, build me a CRM for landscapers. And, you know, in a few hours, they'll have something that looks real. And that's a huge challenge alone, right? The actual barrier to getting that prototype ready and out there within, just a few hours disappeared because
Mm-hmm.
the people that used to describe the software can now start building the first iteration of the software. And that's very powerful. I think that's the good part. It unlocks creativity. And from my experience, when I worked with stakeholders that needed to articulate their ideas, it wasn't always as easy to get the right ideas into the backlog. Whereas if they show me a prototype that they vibe coded during their trip to I don't know, somewhere nice and sunny, it gives me an immediate overview of what they're trying to achieve. So
Mm-hmm.
it really compresses the distance between uh, their ideas and an actual demo. That's a good
That,
part in my
That
opinion.
that is
that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to mention, I will be the person who will be sharing the questions and the market trends and everything that we've collected from the attendees and from the participants. We're all seeing this shift that I think is happening right now, that is coming from can you code to do you understand what you're building, and I believe that's what you were talking about right now. So let's move on to how to build it right from the start, because as you mentioned, it starts with writing down the right ideas in the backlog, right? So how to build it right from the start. What does a disciplined vibe coding setup actually look like?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's this really easy framework that anyone can use, right? To even get to the point when you decide whether you should continue vibe coding or stop, right? Um, and I called it BLAST, BLAST, right? So it contains 5 questions that founders need to ask before the blast actually happens. That's why it was kind of funny how that worked out. And it starts with the business outcome, right? All the first question should always be, what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to prove, right? Is it proving that an integration is possible? Is it proving that users will pay for your software? Or Are you trying to prove that you can do more work with the same team? Because a lot of bad MVPs, even prior to vibe coding, failed because they were trying to prove everything at once, right? And they, should become a more focused version and maybe even tiny version of what you're trying to solve. So, what is the one thing you need to learn? Then the L, the legal and data risk, super important, right? What data will my product need to touch? And there's a huge difference between a product or prototype that stores fake data, demo data, and one that interfaces with your customer records or can, send out invoices or access transaction data or patient records, right? That's pretty critical. And the moment real data enters, the standards should change, right? Because then you need to care about access control, data retention, encryption, audit trails, etc. So, what data are you putting at risk, right? Then the A, architecture boundary. Um, some people now decide to make throwaway code, right? They write throwaway code knowingly that at some point they're going to throw it away, but a real development team steps in and builds the actual product. So, are you considering it a throwaway product, or do you want it to become the actual foundation? And that matters more than most people might realize. Because if it's throwaway, great, move fast, vibe code, like keep vibing, learn quickly, don't over engineer, and just get a prototype ready. But if there's a chance that it becomes a real product and you want paying users to start using it at some point, you need some basic boundaries from day one, like a sensible data model or a clean separation of concerns, a deployment process, testing process, and more importantly, which a lot of people forget, an easy way for the real engineering team to understand it later, right? Because Stasia, I'm sure you've seen this. Like, there's often when you get a team of engineers into a vibe coded product, it's not like you get handed this nice package with well documented code. It's usually, challenging.
Stefan, it's a not nice question to ask within our audience, right? But definitely,
It's good for the self awareness.
That's true. That's true. That's a question that everyone should ask themselves. But I wanted to say that you really need to have the strong senior or architect level engineers to be able to work with such a code, right? Because usually there is no pattern, there is no architecture in place. You should be ready to see, I don't know, hard coded password somewhere, right? And not be surprised just because it was wipe coded. So you have to now deal with it and come back and see, probably even do this reverse engineering in some way to just make it happen, make it work. And to your previous architecture point, I had an idea that many founders at the very beginning say, hey, I will wipe code right now. We'll add some users. There will be just some of them. We'll test. Then we'll throw this away and we'll build something properly. But then the users start to join. And the founders became hostages of their own platform just because they want to add features, they wanted the business to grow. So they either need to invest separately in building something, next to their existing platform or solution or anything, right? Or change the, I usually about it, change the tires on the full speed, right? It's tricky. But still probably possible. F1, really.
Yeah, there's no quick pit stop for vibe coded projects yet, but I think it's very valid. Like, once you start seeing users pay for your product and your Stripe account starts filling up or whatever you use, and you're suddenly making 50 or 100,000 or more, it can be very tempting to just keep hitting the marketing now and just ignore that maybe one day my users might see someone else's data.
And I can understand them, just
Yeah.
because it's very tempting, right? It's like for business owners, founders, it's their own child, and if it's growing, if it's like shows the results, then we have to be super flexible around it, like, and to help them, try to help them early on. I would say that even some early stage consultations may help prevent the future problems, because you don't
Yeah.
think about the data breach unless you face a fine of, I don't know, £1 million, right? And like, you have to deal with this if you work with really sensitive data somewhere in Europe. So it's
That's a
tricky.
good segue, by the way, because that's the S in the BLAST stands for security, right? What must never happen. And I think you obviously don't need a enterprise level process for every idea, but you do need to know your worst case scenarios, right? And the question really is, like, you need to ask yourself this question: what would make this embarrassing, expensive, or illegal? And if you can cover those, like, yeah, you could probably sleep a little better at night already, and your product is in a better shape.
It's true. It's true. You have to make the thoughtful life decisions, right? To move forward.
Yeah, I wanted
Yeah.
to jump in with a direct question, because we've mentioned that self-reflection is needed, but sometimes it's very hard to understand that it's you who people are talking about, right? So someone right now might be sitting and thinking like, my MVP is fine. I'll just add a few features and it's gonna be all right. So at what point does I'll fix it later become I can fix it at all?
That's a good question. I mean, part of that is depends, I guess, on the team ownership, right? If it's just a founder who's responsible and taking full responsibility, it still is important to have this like boundary of when you can say like, okay, I cannot onboard new users anymore because the security problems we have will get problematic. And I mean, one really easy way I found to just get this process going is ask people who've not been in your network to sign up and give you honest feedback. I had someone reach out from a company last week where he asked me like, hey, try this one-click OpenClaw install. And I had never worked with the company before. And I realized later what he got was super insightful insights into how, in his case, bad the process was compared to another company offering the same service.
That
Because
was
whenever you
very
ask,
high price quality assurance, I would say, Stefan.
maybe, but I think even when you start having doubts, like, it never hurts to get a second opinion, right? Even if it's just a consultation with a developer or someone senior that understands uh, what secure software looks like, it's always good to get that second opinion. And to then have a way to say like, okay, this is not sensible right now, but I need to keep this in the back of my mind. That's fine if that's your takeaway. But I think the other side of the coin is, when will your clients start asking the difficult questions, right? Especially if you operate in more compliant industries. But even if you do not, when will my clients no longer accept that it might not always work, right? And you'll start to see churn in subscriptions or whatever business model you have. And at the same time, I asked someone this actually today. I said to him, because he was talking about vibe coding, and I asked, does it matter if the data isn't always correct? And he, no, it does matter. That's when you need to get someone on board to check whether the data flow is correct. And I think, obviously, there are a lot of tools that can help you do this, but they require technical know-how to set up, and that's where that barrier is still a little difficult, right? Because in real production apps, like, your Ubers, your Shopify's, like Spotify, whatever, they have all these observability tools and entire teams dedicated to security and scalability, etc. And that can be a bit difficult to set up for an MVP too, because it might feel overkill, right? And a lot of these tools are pretty expensive too. But
Mm-hmm.
it starts
I
with
want
drawing the line between what is an MVP and when am I actually starting to consider this a real product and business on its own, right?
Yeah, true. I wanted to ask a question, but I think Stasia wanted to chip in with
I,
some.
yeah, I just had one minor comment. So um, even for the development companies with AI like everywhere speeding up the development, the implementation of the solutions is not that it's not that long, it's not that complex, because engineers can now use those like more on a professional level tools to speed up everything, or even to check, or even to make a setup for a client to see where the application is going, right, to do this initial review. So it's not the
Mm.
case that you have the PRD and now see you in 3 months at least, right, to face your application. It's now very, very much faster. So I just want to prevent our listeners to think that we are encouraging you to come back to that previous ways of the development, or anything. Like if you talk to someone who is a professional engineer, and I want to say engineer, not a coder, they will be able to help you pretty fast, just to show you the direction where your app or your solution is heading.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And before we move on, sorry, Stefan, I just wanted to encourage our listeners. If you guys have any questions, feel free to write directly in the comments, and I will be obviously asking them to our amazing speakers. We will have a Q&A session at the very end, but if there's any question that is related to the topic, feel free to just drop in the comments. Now, Stefan, the floor is once again yours.
I think there's one very easy signal that even in teams of engineers that I've started seeing is that whenever the team starts losing an understanding of the code base, that's when you need to take a step back and make sure that AI doesn't take the dominant seat anymore. Because at first, a prototype really gives you that speed, right? Like I said, a couple of hours and you have a prototype. But then slowly over time, everything gets harder, and a small feature starts taking a week. A bug fix creates two new bugs. Nobody really wants to refactor because nobody understands the impact, and that's when you get to this stage where you're no longer just paying technical debt. You're paying technical interest, and that interest rate goes up really quickly in tech. And I think now I'm seeing in the bigger teams, especially, that the rewrite clock really starts ticking when nobody can explain why something works the way it does. So the damage signal is that I would say the easiest way to recognize it is whenever you cannot explain why something's there or why it works the way it does, you start losing control over your product.
Sure, 100%. Let's briefly talk about the cost of waiting as well, and then we can move on to the framework. I'm pretty sure our listeners or watchers are eager to hear about that. I wanted to ask, what's the most expensive mistakes you have seen when founders bring in engineering help too late? Not like what broke, what did it actually cost? I believe both of you will have some interesting insights for this one.
Yeah. Yeah, from my perspective, I would say the most expensive mistake is turning your engineering team into a cleanup crew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the minute they step in, and because I get it, like a founder thinks they're saving money, you delay hiring engineers, you're prototyping, you're building quick, your ideas just seem to come to life like really quickly, and sometimes you can for a while. Um, a prototype can be built super cheaply, but when the engineering team comes in and you're no longer working on your roadmap, right? You're not improving the product. necessarily, you're not creating customer value, but you're spending 2, 3, 4 months just purely doing cleanup, untangling the prototype, writing missing documentation, implementing the security that's missing. That is very expensive. And that is also, especially for startups, what kind of like kills the momentum, right? Where the founder might start asking, like, you might start wondering, like, why am I now slower? I've hired engineers, right? This should move much faster. But the reason is it's because you confused a prototype speed with product speed, right? And as soon as a shortcut becomes a business commitment, you have a problem. Because if you have paying customers, they have expectations. And if you then need to spend 2, 3, 4 months engineering your way out of that, that's very difficult. And I've seen this happen too in my last few engagements. When I still did fractional work, there were people who had no proper tenant separation set up until suddenly someone had interest and said, when can I use this product? It
Yeah,
means you
true.
cannot deliver your software until you fix it.
I would send, if I could, I would send you, hearts here that would jump over the screen, just because it's probably something that hurts me personally, as I'm responsible for our cooperation with the customers. That explanation on why we should do this for you to be able to onboard that another couple of thousand users, and it's tricky because you have to visualize this in a way. The application worked, it worked, but in the background there were some pitfalls that we had to fix. So you're not blaming us in in any misalignments on what we are about to deliver. So it's tricky. Thank you for mentioning this. This is huge. The thing that you mentioned about those spent months of untangling your current solution.
Yeah,
and
because
I remember,
ideally you want to bring in people like engineers to build the future of what you're building, right? Instead of having to do cleanup. You
That's true.
want them to be able to move faster because you have competitors building stuff too, of course. And if you spend 3 months cleaning up and your competitor is able to move along and introduce new features, that is going to be problematic.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, Stasia, you mentioned on one of our previous calls that your advice would be to invest when scaling, not when you're already failing, because bad reputation, lost clients, the revenue you were protecting then will already be gone. And I believe this is a nice transition to move on to the framework and to actually telling our listeners and watchers who's watching about the framework of yours, Stefan.
Yeah, I mean, to kick it off, I think the mistake people make with vibe coding is they focus too much on arguing whether AI is good or bad, right? But that's the wrong question, in my opinion. The better question to ask is, what states are you in and what's the risk you're carrying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's 4 stages, I think, to every product. You start with the spec, right? The description of what you're building, which is now very cheap to make, the prototype. Usually the founder owns it, right? Or whoever is responsible. You can really quickly get this going, and it's a great way to get the ideas out there. But the next step where it starts getting critical already is the scaffolding, right? Because to get to a working prototype with the right shape, sure, you can still do parts of this with AI and the founder, but you could start mistaking a prototype for a product already. And, I think this is where usually the technical debt starts getting introduced already. Because as you start to build the scaffolding, right, the working prototype, you have the authentication, you might start introducing some kind of data model, some core user journeys. You might deploy it somewhere on some hosting where real users start to use it. sure, AI can generate these components, endpoints, database schemas, dashboards, integrations. That's where coding earns part of its keep. But before you start getting there are a few critical questions you need to ask yourself, right? Where does the data live? Um, how much do I need to do to get from just a few users to 10,000 users or 50,000 users? What compliance needs do I need to meet to get this prototype into the hands of paying users, right? I think there's a lot of people that maybe haven't even touched software before, but now start using vibe coding to build their prototypes. And typically, when you start working with the more enterprise customers, they start asking all these difficult questions related to security and compliance because they have to meet their compliance standards too. The other thing, like, what is reversible, right? Which choices can I make in an afternoon, and which ones can I no longer explain 2 weeks from now? And those are the kind of things you should start documenting very early on to make sure that when you bring someone on, they understand your choices. Because it might feel like you're saving time by just saying, like, I'm just going to prompt until this AI gives me the prototype I want. But it moves the cost to a later point, right? Maybe 3 months from now, maybe it could be longer. But I think the more important part is usually the third stage, which is when you start getting to the actual substance and you bring in the momentum, right? When the prototype starts getting real users, people start onboarding into your platform, where you get the edge cases you didn't consider. People start clicking in places you wouldn't normally click. There's all these weird race conditions because, hey, someone might enter their last name instead of an email address. Who knows? And once you start getting to the point where you have partial failures, or you start getting emails like, hey, I tried to sign up but it didn't work, like, that's when it starts getting critical already, and you're probably already one step too far into the vibe coding, and you should really hit the brakes and say, I need to bring in some engineers now because there's stability issues. The AI has cut too many corners, and you're not able to get the right amount of observability you need to mature your product. And I think, honestly, the question I would ask myself at that point is, am I doing a good enough job delivering value for my paying customers, right? I actually remember very early on, I had a friend give me a demo. He said, like, hey, I built this amazing tool. It's going to automate Google Ads. And the moment I got onto the call, I tried to sign up, and he was like, oh, you can't sign up. But it works for me. And these situations happen. You
Good
learn.
for you. Right. That's a tricky. Yeah.
But the other side is, AI is still useful in the substance part, but its role should change, right? AI can, when you're scaffolding, the AI can be the code generator, right? That's completely fine. But when you start getting to the more substance part, it should become a pair programmer paired with someone who has the knowledge, right? Like you said before, someone that has been an engineer for many, many years can use AI to obviously speed up their workflow, and they should. But letting an AI write the test or generate the suggestions, or suggest refactors, sure, it can make a starting point, but it often still doesn't fully understand the code base the same way an engineer would, because it doesn't ask difficult questions it should, right? The architecture decisions need to stay with a human, because AI can write code. Code arguably will become cheaper in a way, unless LLMs and AI starts becoming more expensive. But it cannot reliably tell you which code is throwaway code or load bearing, right? What is part of the foundation? I would challenge you, go into your project and ask your AI, what is load bearing code in my project? You should try it. And that's the type of engineering judgment that you need to bring in once you start getting to your substance and your growth phase, right? And most people wait way too long, because they don't recognize that this is the part where the AI is not able to keep up anymore. And Another thing that's super important, I think, is before you start to scale, right? Scaling is production reality. At some point, going from 1,000 to 10,000 or 100,000 users requires a completely different setup, right? It's monitoring, having people on call. You need to have incident response plans. You need to worry about the performance, the deployment pipelines, rollbacks, right? If I roll out a release that breaks something, can I roll back? Now, am I ready for an audit? What do I do if the data center or my hosting provider goes offline? With 1,000 users, it's a little more forgiving maybe, but once businesses start relying on your prototype, your product to run their day-to-day, you cannot get away with, sorry, the data center had a fire. We had a fire at a data center in the Netherlands not so long ago. Many companies were exposed for being offline, right? Because that just means they haven't fixed their observability and their hosting. But the mistake most founders make is hiring once they get to that stage where they are already scaling, when in reality, they're then not hiring engineers to keep the momentum. It's almost like performing CPR for your code base, with all due respect. You're trying to fix and patch as much as you can, but you're already too late because you are scaling already, and the issues are already, piling up. And I think you said it very well. You need to bring in engineers when things are working, not when they're already on fire, right?
True.
But if you want to bring the engineers when you are already on fire, please contact Stephan or myself. We will be open to help you. We are that, well-known firefighters in this kind of situation. But you have to follow the rules. That's the sad truth. I love the saying how Andrew Karpate put it. He said, "You can outsource your thinking right now, but you cannot outsource your understanding and your responsibility. So responsibility is still on your end. And if you do not understand that, you need to have someone by your side to understand what's happening. And that's probably the way you, Stephan, put it about when the problems come, when the question comes. You need to address it, and if you cannot address it, that's already a bad sign.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say to our participants that this framework will be sent to everyone who's joined us today via email as a downloadable PDF resource that I want to just demonstrate for a few minutes, because it is a very nice and useful and valuable resource. And it will be in your inboxes right after the webinar. And I just wanted to encourage you that if when you are a non-tech person, all of this might seem super overwhelming, but I just wanted to say that when you have the right help and right people working with you who understand the architecture, who understand the system and not just prompting LLMs, everything is super easy. So I wanted to encourage, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn or via our email address that I will be writing down in the comments right now. And obviously the opportunity of a consultation with Stephan is on, and we will be waiting for that project information. But mainly to sum up all of it, most of the people watching this as I understand, have already deployed, and they might not have made that mandatory step. So don't be scared. It's doable, as Stephan mentioned at the very beginning. And for us to kind of sum up this conversation, I wanted to ask both of you, what do you think, what comes next, and what would be your predictions for the people who are watching, what they should look out for? Is there any advice? Is there like one mandatory step that you would ask them to make if like they have to make only one step? And I will be writing down the email address in the comments right now.
Yeah, I mean, I want to iterate, like, I am not anti-vibe coding, and I think vibe coding is one of the most, founder-friendly changes I've seen in software, right? It lets people build earlier, get closer to their users. The danger is when we confuse that working prototype with a production system. And I think what you're starting to see is that a lot of companies have experimented over the past few years and have started settling for this hybrid model where there's the human in the loop, but the AI, like AI with engineers, can move faster, obviously, but they have that human in the loop that has the understanding and the technical know-how to make sure that you don't take the wrong turns. And I mean, I think if you don't use AI, you're gonna fall behind at some point. And if you just blindly ship with AI, you use, you're potentially going to be the one that gets left behind once you need to get trust. And you need to trust your product and have that stability. And I think what I'm seeing across the board, in also in the bigger companies, is that they are now starting to figure out how to get a grip on the agents and make them a part of their team, right? These AI tools. And I think honestly, it's very cool to now see, even people at the front desk being able to say like, "Hey, I had this idea over the weekend, and look at this," and they send me a Lovable link, and I'm like, "Fantastic! Like you prototyped something we could now iterate and take into a meeting." But I think vibe coding should never be the enemy, but unowned code that no one understands, that's where it gets risky. And that's what companies are now starting to realize a bit more too, I think, that they need that human in the loop kind of process where, AI is an assistant and not necessarily the sole owner of the product.
Stasia, what's your take?
As I mentioned at the very beginning, I will be on the customer side. So I don't have any technical advice. Only I would encourage each and everyone to think deeply about their users and about their business 2 steps ahead. So think about the future. Just probably even had some roadmap somewhere, and be ready for it to be ready to face it. And good luck everyone who is doing this stuff. It's really a great opportunity, and we are probably lucky people that see this kind of phase right now, when everyone can implement their dream solution out there, right?
True.
Yeah.
I've just received an information that we have a technical difficulty, and sadly, the comment sections were off for our YouTube watchers. And maybe that is not maybe, I'm pretty sure that is why we haven't received any questions so far. However, once again, I want to apologize for our participants and encourage them that if you guys have any questions, feel free to send all of them to our LinkedIn or to our email address, and we will be answering them as fast as we can with the best advice, obviously with Stefan.
Yeah, it's very cool. I don't think any founder should be afraid of vibe coding though. And honestly, the only takeaway I would say is vibe coding does not replace engineering. Like I know that's the promised land, and there's a lot of people that will be very angry with me saying this right now, but we're just not quite there yet, right? And it makes good engineering more important too, I think. It gives founders a faster path to discovering what is worth engineering properly.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the future is less engineering, but I think it's going to be faster creation with better engineering guardrails around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 2 years from now, we will maybe even stop talking about vibe coding as this sort of weird niche category. It will just become a part of how software is made, and maybe it's on the prototype side. But I think it enables a lot of people to explore their workflows and their ideas, and designers might use it to make interactive mock-ups of their ideas, and engineers will I've met developers that now do 2 jobs, freelance jobs, when they used to be able to do 1, because they've gained so much productivity that they just clearly say to their clients, like, hey, I do 2 jobs, but know that I'm able to deliver the same capacity as a full-time developer pre-AI. So
That's true.
I'm very happy that we're ending the webinar with a positive note, as we should be, as I think, because I think because yeah, we're always seeing the same thing with AI trends. I've already mentioned before. We have this spike, the boom, then we have this pessimistic fatigue, and then we are balancing and learning, and once again with the right people in your team who understand how everything's working, who have done this work before, it's so much easier than just trying to figure it out on your own. I think we have. I was just going through the questions that I have collected from our audience before the webinar, and I think we have covered everything. We will be once again sharing the framework with our attendees via email address, so they will be able to go through the points that Stasia and Stephan covered today by themselves. If they have any questions, they will reach out. And I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. Even before we started the webinar, I knew that I would just be sitting here smiling and listening to 2 amazing people explaining the things in the simplest, easiest, and in the most valuable way possible. So thank you for finding time, Stephan. Thank you for finding time, Stasia, to answer these questions that we've been receiving for a while, and a lot of people wanted to have answers for. And for our usual participants, once again, thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you again very, very soon with our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kata, for directing us in our conversation.
My truest pleasure. My truest pleasure. We'll be waiting for the questions, and yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.